Thank you, Madam President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, you know, if history has taught us one lesson, it's taught us that once we go down the path of deciding who is and who's not a human being, we have always lost our way. Unequivocally, we should know by now that a departure from the path of our humanity to one another has resulted in grave consequences, and grave loss of life. We should also have the self-awareness to know that decisions like these are not destinations, they're paths that lead to things that we don't want to think about because they can get worse. We just saw the story of Alfie Evans in England. We were all horrified to see that the parents of that child had no say under that tyranny of that government. And once we go down the path where a government gets to decide who is and who's not a human being, that's the start. I had an experience 17 years ago I'm never going to forget. I have a private practice in Sioux City on a Friday night, about 4:45. I was getting ready to go home for the weekend. And I got a phone call from a woman who was very emotional, very frantic. And she said to me, "I want to sue Planned Parenthood." And I said, "Well, why?" She said, "I had an ultrasound 8 weeks ago, and they told me I wasn't pregnant, and I found out I have 1 week to have an abortion. And I don't know what to do." And I said, "Well, can I ask you a couple of personal questions?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, "Why are you having the abortion? Is it okay for me to ask, why are you doing this?" And she said to me, "I have 3 kids. My husband just left me. And I don't have the money to take care of this 4th child. I work at a fast food pizza place here in Sioux City." And I said, "Well, have you ever considered giving up the baby for adoption?" And she said, "No." And I said, "Well, it sounds like you're under a lot of economic pressure." I said, Can I just ask you something?" And she said, "Okay." I said, "If I were to give you $500 a month to help you with your bills, to carry that child to term, would you consider that?" And she said to me, "You would do that?" And I said, "I have a check for you right now. Come get it." And she was there 10 minutes later, and I gave her the check, and I said, "I'll see you next month." And I didn't. And I thought, I guess that baby died. But a year later, I got a note, a thank you note, a profusely emotional thank you note with a picture of a little baby girl. She had given that baby up for adoption, and that baby was now part of a family in Nebraska. And so, it's like, wow. That was an amazing thing. And then 15 years later, I'm out canvassing to run for the Iowa House of Representatives. And I knock on this door in Morningside, and this man I don't know looks at me like he knows me. And he says, "Come on in, Jim." And I'm like, "You know me?" And I had no idea who he was. And this woman walked into the living room of the house, and I looked at her and I said, "You look awful familiar to me." And she said to me, "Jim," and I'm not going to disclose her name, but she told me her name. And I thought, wow, how are you? How are you? And, it got emotional. And she said to me, "Come here, I want to show you something." And she walked me into her dad's kitchen. And on that refrigerator in the kitchen, there was a picture of a 15-year-old girl on a horse on a family farm in Nebraska. You know what I thought? You know, if I don't do anything else in my entire life, at least I got to be part of that. At least I got to be part of saving the life of a human being. And you know, I got to tell you, women have it rougher, I think. I mean, most of my heroes as a lawyer were single moms. And having to take on that responsibility is huge. But the life of a human being, I think, is worth it. And, you know, fathers just seem to get further and further away from this conversation. Like the relevance of fatherhood is gradually being diminished in a culture that's getting farther and farther away from a family consisting of a mom and a dad and children. And we need to have compassion and understanding and acceptance of responsibility to the mother and to the child, and, you know, embrace them, give them the resources they need. You know, I listen to so many heartfelt arguments from you guys, and I got to say, a lot of them connect with me. This is the same conversation we're having here. This is about our humanity. This is about how we define how we're going to value one another. You know, every February, each year, last year in the House, Abdul Samad has Black History Month. And you know, during that month, we get to listen to speeches about inspiring figures in Black history who overcame great adversity and made a huge difference for humanity. And you know, I mean, that's compelling. But there's some other things, there's some other realities here that are compelling. Did you know 36% of abortions are Black children, despite the fact they only make up 12.8% of our population base? Did you know that 79% of Planned Parenthoods are located primarily in minority neighborhoods? That 1/3 of Black children are aborted? Did you know in New York City, more Black children are aborted than born? I mean, it's time to call that what it is, folks. That's genocide. That's genocide. It's minority genocide. And you know, I like to believe that, you know, we're at a place where we know racism has no place in this country, where freedom and the dignity of the individual should define all of us. You know, we have work to do on race. We have work to do on sex after everything we've seen this last year with all the sexual harassment things coming out. Women shouldn't be objectified. But it's my hope that we're always going to seek to look to elevate our humanity. That's the path we should be on. And I have to think that gestation, a number of weeks, was never intended to define the value of a human being's life. We're now going to define our value by weeks. It was bad enough it was by the color of a man's skin or the sex of a person or their disability or their age, but now it's reduced to weeks. You know, there's a lot of, you know, as a lawyer, you take on court appointments, you do China cases. China cases are cases, children in need of assistance cases. And what you find out in a lot of these cases is these kids get the hell beat out of them. They're beaten, they're tortured, and because the walls silence the cries, nobody knows, the doors are closed, and the cries of those children aren't heard. And I have to tell you here, just because we can't hear a cry doesn't mean there isn't one. Just because we can't hear that sound doesn't mean there isn't one. When this takes place, And I submit to you, we make another mistake. It's bad enough that this involves the taking of a life of a human being. But you know something? That isn't all there is to it. Because from each of us come many. Now, my wife and I lost a little boy. We have 3 kids. I have 3 grandkids. My wife has a husband. My friends have a friend in me. My life isn't just about me. Life came from me. And it will continue to come through my children and my grandchildren. And all of those lives, which are many, will be lost. Everybody in this room has a story. Every one of you guys. You have spouses, you have kids. Your kids wouldn't be here if your life had ended that early. Your grandchildren would not be here. Think of that. Think of the life's work that you guys have committed yourself to in this chamber, and you mean it sincerely from the heart. None of that happens if you're not here. And I respect you. But that doesn't happen if you're not here. I believe that the extension of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness applies to those yet born. They're going to be our teachers. They're going to be our doctors. They're going to be our contractors, our truck drivers. They're going to be our scientists, our mothers, our fathers, our children, our brothers, our cousins, our best friends. We just got to give them the time to get there. And I think our humanity requires that of us. I think our path in this process is to always seek to elevate the dignity and value of human beings. And I hear that from your caucus a lot. I believe it. This is equally true. You know, humanity triumphs when we see the truth, the reality, that there's another human being involved. That's when the value of all of us is elevated. When we all look at each other and we all say, you're a human being too, and I'm going to afford you the dignity and respect I would want for myself. We have a unique opportunity here before us. With passage of this bill, we can be part of saving lives, generations of lives. We can be part of a process that elevates the value and dignity of people. You know, God says there's a purpose to every life. He says we're eternal. I mean, if you're a person of faith, he says we're eternal. You know what? He made each of us unique among billions. You know, I believe he died for us. What's the message of that? Every one of you matters to me. And maybe part of where we've gotten off is excluding God from the conscience of our culture. Maybe we need to have that moment of self-awareness where we just look in our soul and say, God, what do you want us to do? You know? One of my favorite, I'm a football, kind of a football junkie, and one of my favorite coaches is Coach Eddie Robinson at Grambling University. It's an all-black university. Coach Robinson coached there for 56 years. When you were an incoming freshman, before you went out to that first practice in spring ball, there was a banner on that field that had the words, "Everybody is somebody." He made you walk under that banner for a reason. Because he wanted everybody treated like they were somebody. And I think that is the path we need to take in this entire process. We have an opportunity to cast a giant shadow on the lives and dignity of the children of this state, and maybe more, and we ought to take it. Thank you, Madam President.